So this is what we're going to look to render. In a prior video we've got, this is a setup, just trying to establish where light sources are. So as a recap, you get 1, 2, 3 is order of light, medium, dark, and essentially in terms of markers what that turns into is you go over it once, twice, 3 times. So this is the light source we're going to use, and this is how it's going to translate into a render on the original sketch. I start always first with the darkest areas of any image because they're the most forgiving. Because if you've done a little bit patchy, then you can get away with it. So that's where I'm going to start. It's important when you're rendering also to go in the shape of the object. Markers don't leave up the lines to the same extent as you do with coloured pencils, but you definitely still get that effect coming in with the markers as well. So it's important to try and render in that same shape, because you will have some of the lines still show up, and you want those lines to help emphasize that it's that shape, not the opposite. Okay, so this is starting to show as its shape, but as we go around it more and more, and you want to get quicker in these light parts there and just kind of fade it, because essentially you're going to work back and forth just trying to get this blend working as best we can. Right, so that there is not perfect, but it's pretty good before we flip to use the other side. But essentially you can start seeing that shape happening, and what we tend to use to push the values just to emphasize it is I just use a pencil or a white pencil as well, just to get those highlight areas. I always tend to start with the easiest parts of my renders as well. Reason being is what it does is it also just helps kind of build confidence as you're starting to render. So when you get up for doing the difficult parts, you're kind of a little bit more comfortable, and the difficult parts don't seem so difficult because it's the last bits to do. Just trying to remember where your light source is coming from, because essentially that's the biggest thing that tends to throw any render out, is inconsistency with the light source. You can use the markers perfectly, you can render perfectly, but essentially if that light source is not consistent, then no, you haven't rendered perfectly at all, and it does look a little bit off. So you can see I've got a bit of bleed here. That's fine, I can just make the shape slightly bigger, and I can fix some of these things up when I do the age old, just cut it out. But we'll attempt not to have to cut this out, just because it speeds the process up if you don't have to do these things. And I'm also doing something a little bit more difficult, particularly if I was wanting to do a quick render. This is more of a development render in terms of it's all going to be in full color. I'm not going to leave any kind of white patches. Reason being doesn't work so well is because I've got such a dark colored marker. If I use a lighter colored marker, the difference between the marker and the white isn't so extreme, and it tends to look quite good doing that. But with going from a real kind of bright dark red to white paper, as you can see there, it stands off as quite extreme. So to leave the white spots, you tend to need to use colored pencil or something just to kind of fade and soften that. So I'll do another video of this exact same sheet that I will photocopy, because this is just basic photocopy paper. And I'll show you how you can do kind of the speed render as well, where you leave it white and you essentially just get the emphasize kind of where the dark parts are and where the highlights are, and just do it really quick like that. And then we'll get into using other techniques with paper, different kinds of paper as well, and some cool results you can get with that as well. Okay, so I'm starting to get towards the end of the shape where we'll start seeing this all come together. I'll need to flip it to do the number 3 side. And as you've noticed, I haven't actually used the fine tip, which I should be using. Oops, you see I made a mistake there. You know, I could or should use for the more closer details, but essentially it just makes it quicker for me not having to keep changing the lids in and out. Okay, so my shape's getting a little bit out of whack, and I just need to be careful about that. So, right, this is where we really need to tidy it up. So now I go back through, make sure I go from dark to light, and just blend it up. This is where you need to work a bit quick, just because what it enables the markers to do is kind of blend into each other. So essentially what you're seeing here now is that the markers can't the page can't soak up any more of the marker. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting these areas dark as possible. So as you can see, these values are starting to kind of be a lot more consistent, and it is just being patient, going backwards and forth and just working it up carefully and kind of being consistent. For particularly doing sphere and rounded shapes, they do tend to be by far the hardest to do, particularly with markers, because you know you can't do them lighter and darker by pushing less than as you would with a pencil. So what it requires is you to go over it more and less, essentially, to do just that, to get that same effect. So as you can see there, it's a little bit patchy, but it's almost there, and that should help even it out. Right, so all I need to do is go over these now and just kind of fix them up, and then I'm due to flip. Then I can do shadows and the other bits and pieces, and you'll really see it come from something that's looking decent to something that's looking actually pretty good. So little bits where I went over that you don't need to be so fussy about, because what the other thing I want to do is now is cast a shadow as well. So essentially I need to see, right, okay, there's the light source going this way, I need to go right, that's where my shadow's going to be. Same with this. I'm just going to push it a little bit more this way. So I just need to lighten that up because it's a little bit dark. Issue is if you've got your pencil lines on there too dark, they don't come out. once you get the marker over the top, you can't actually rub them out. So you just need to keep them in just faint enough for you to see. So this is where I use my fine tip. So it's looking a bit better, but I need to just make sure these edges are as dark as they can be before I flip. Right, so from there, that's looking pretty decent. I need to cast a shadow underneath it, but I'll do that absolutely last. So what I need to do, besides just fixing this bit up, right. So you can see how just repetitively going back over bits and pieces will help ensure you've kind of got that right in terms of how dark it should be. So next trick then is to flip the page, and then from there I'll have to just emphasize where my shadows are going to be. So what we need to do is work on this is the reverse side of the page now, as you can see. So I can see in here where my shadow is. Going to be, and I just need to kind of outline for myself as a guide, just to help myself be consistent. Where we're going to get those darkest parts to be. Because what we don't want to try and do is kind of overbleed past the line, because it definitely shows through on the other side. But it will be good. Okay. And then obviously I need to do the whole shape as well. And obviously keep in mind where your darkest edge is going to be. So because this is still a round shape, I can't render it just kind of flat. We'll try not to anyway. So yeah, this is where you can see I get bits of overbleed and that. This is where you got to try and be careful not to do that. Right, okay. So the other thing is now I've got to do my shadow, just re-emphasize them, and then I've got to do my highlights and then do my big shadow underneath as well. And this is just a 2B pencil, that's all that is. Okay, so that's definitely, you can see that's starting to help emphasize the shadows. Right, so what we want to do is then go, right, okay, where is this shadow going to be? So I want to go, that's the shadow for the whole ball. So that's this whole shape. Then yeah, we need to get this ball here, there, this here needs to stick up the top here. You can work these out really, really accurately, but accurate enough tends to work quite well. So I just think there should have been a little bit there. So I'm actually going to go straight in with actually quite a dark marker now and just do the shadow. So from there, it's really just going to help clean up this bottom edge. So just as you go through, just be careful, because we don't want to go onto parts of the render. Okay, so that's tidied and lifted it quite a bit. So just zoom out a little bit. There, okay, this part here is not quite perfect, so I'll just look to make that a little bit more rounded. Right, that's accurate enough. Now the other thing I need to do is do some highlights. It's amazing the difference that highlights make, and it is well worth doing. Okay, so what you need is normally quite a good white pencil. I mean, this one's obviously had quite a bit of use, but you'll see why. And the great thing about these is you can rub them out. So if you've kind of got a little bit too carried away, okay, and if you really want, you can use things like this, the white pens. Just to kind of give that highlight spot. And I'm actually just going to go back round now with this pencil here just to darken some areas.